To call our special meeting of City Council for Tuesday, January 23rd, 2024 to order. The City of Dawson Creek acknowledges that we are privileged to live and work on Treaty 8 territory and the traditional home of the Cree, Denize, Saulteaux, Sicanee, and Slavey First Nations. We value the Métis people that live and gather here. We commit to upholding the respectful relationships these nations have built with the land, and we acknowledge our responsibility to carry that forward today and into the future. Two reports, 2.1, report number 24-020 from the Chief Administrative Officer regarding water conservation measures. Before we open it up for discussion, I just wouldn't mind getting a recommendation on the floor. So, Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Worship. I'd like to move that report number 24-020 from the Chief Administrative Officer regarding water conservation measures be received. Further, the Council directs staff to issue a notice of Stage 2 water conservation measures effective February 5th, 2024 until further notice.
Thank you, Councillor McDonald. Do I have a second? Councillor Apollonio. As well, we do have Councillor Kemp attending via phone, so everybody is here. I'm going to open it up to Kevin first just to kind of give an update, and then we can go from there. So,
all right, thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick overview. Thank you for everybody coming in today. Last week, late last week, Friday, staff did some investigation at the water intake as we had seen in the days leading up to that. The levels at the intake were dropping significantly. So they went in to investigate and see, what was happening. What staff determined late Friday is that likely due to the low levels in the Kiskatna, that the cold weather that we experienced in the previous week had likely all but froze the river off upstream of our intake. And so at that point, staff made the decision rightfully to turn the pumps off at the river, mainly to protect our intake infrastructure until we could gather more information. Subsequently, since over the weekend, and what we've determined is that there is some water coming into that intake area, so that's good news. It hasn't completely froze off, so that's a positive. But what it was telling us is that we were simply withdrawing more out of that area than what was coming in. So a couple things, and just why we're here today is in light of our restrictions on how much we can pump or if we can pump at all, we decided that the prudent thing to do would be to go to Stage 2 or recommend Stage 2 water restrictions to Council. The reason for that is Stage 2 is the trigger point for when industry is no longer permitted to take potable water for industrial uses. And we had seen over the last month, 6 weeks, quite a increase in that demand. If you're down near 116th or 1st Street, you would have seen trucks lined up, not only for the reclaim plant, which is great, but also for the potable water fill station. So we'd seen an uptick there using between 800 and 900 cubic meters a day. So the first thing we thought is we should look at recommending that, and that would eliminate that use. On the positive side, as I mentioned, we've got reclaimed water. Right now, we're able to produce just shy of 4,000 cubic meters, and that's just based on what's coming into the lagoon system. Truck fills have been busy, and we've seen trucks lined up there, so they're utilizing it. I think we're using plus or minus maybe 2,000 cubic meters a day at the water reclamation plant. We have additional capacity to produce and dispense that. So I think we can definitely see an increase of maybe up to 3,000 plus cubic meters at the truck fills. So that's good news. So we can certainly try and encourage industry to go that way. I want to be clear that if this goes through, that this does not in any way restrict drinking water uses for rural residents or for commercial water haulers who haul drinking water. So that is not impacted. This is simply industry that utilizes potable water for their processes. Anybody who's hauling drinking water, it's still permitted and not an issue. As you'll see in the report too, and just for the benefit of those folks that might be watching, I just thought I'd touch on some of the infrastructure that we have implemented over the years to really combat and mitigate this particular situation. So it really stems back from 1992 when the Kiskatna ran dry, and we didn't have a weir, and the intake was high and dry, and we had no ability to withdraw water. And so at that particular instance, we installed a weir at the intake and went upriver and broke free all the beaver dams and released water enough that we could pump some water. And really from that point forward, councils of the day decided that they needed to invest in some additional water infrastructure to protect the community from those sorts of instances. And so over the years, we've installed a weir at Bear Hole Lake. We've built additional raw water storage at the Hanson Reservoir and most recently the South Dawson that provides significant water storage for us. So even though we're going to, recommending to go to stage 2, we do have things in place to mitigate that certainly will help us ride out this drought that's been the province as a whole really has been dealing with for the last 18 months. And again, we're into a dry winter and we'll see what happens over the next few months leading into spring. But we're hopeful we're going to get some additional moisture, and we're hopeful we have a good fresh set. We're hopeful that we get some spring rains and things will be in a better place than they are today. But what my responsibility is to inform council of where we're at, and more importantly, trying to look ahead a few months of where we might be. And so that's really the intent here is although we've got a lot of water on hand right now, we need to make sure that if it continues to be dry and we get into a dry summer, that we need to have storage on hand to get us throughout the summer. So being cautious with that, I guess, is my approach at this point. So is there any questions about the report, what I've had to say, any of that? I can certainly
I mean, it's just before I open it up, I just wanted to thank you, but could you also touch a little bit on just what happens when we use those reserves, and because we don't have water coming in right now, if we do, that it's not just a matter of when we can turn the pumps back on, they fill them, and then also that this is, precautionary, like to mitigate risk to the community, like it's not that we,
Right. So right now we're not pumping. We're going to be looking over the next while about if we can maybe just pump at a reduced rate, which will continue to get some water into our reservoirs and augment, our usage. But let's just say we're unable to pump for a period of time because of the really low flows. That's great. We've got lots of storage. We start to deplete storage, and in a month we might deplete, let's say 20-25% of our storage in South Dawson. As I was explaining to the mayor earlier, when we get to pump again, the challenge is that we still have to provide flow to town, which is, let's just say it's an average of 6,000 cubic meters. We can only pump 9,000, so that means the extra 3,000 goes into the reservoir. Now it's going to take us 3 months plus to fill that 25% back up. So anything that we use takes, much longer to replenish because we still have to, provide supply to town. So again, that's why you have to be careful of how far you draw down. It's going to take time to replenish those reserves, so.
And some of that is because of restrictions that were put on coming out of the Kiskatna, like we can only take certain amounts
That's
depending on
right.
flow.
We're limited to the flows. Our permit is tied to the flows in the Kiskatna. And so when the flows in the Kiskatna are above a certain rate, we can take more water. When it's less than that, we have to take less. And right now it's basically all but zero. And so we're restricted to only being able to take plus or minus 8,000 cubes a day. The reality is there's not even that much flowing. So we have to take less than that. We will, and have already started talking about spring freshet and what that looks like. Normally, we don't pump during the highest flows in the river because the Kiskatna is very turbid. And usually we have the luxury of just shutting the pumps off for a period of time, letting the dirtiest, runoff water go by and then start pumping again. We may have to do something different this year. We'll plan for that. And it's just, the environment's different, right? Like I said, we've been battling a drought for 18 months and there's no end in it yet. And so we have to manage it.
Okay, thank you. Just before I open it up, I just want to thank you, Kevin, for the effort into to all this and also to your team. I know when you say late Friday, it was really late Friday that they were out there. So
No, I appreciate that.
Just pass a thank you on to them. So, Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Worship.
Oh, I shut you off.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not.
So rude.
Okay.
Thank you. Through you to Kevin. In our last council meeting and now in this meeting too, we've talked about having major lineups at our reclaimed water facility. Is there a need there to further develop that, to add another fill station? Is that something we are able to do, or just to further take off the pressure so that industry isn't thinking about a quicker, faster way that we can supply their need?
Right. So through your worship, so right now, like I said, if they're running 24 hours a day, we can move 3,000 plus cubic meters out of the truck fill. Could we add onto it? Yes, certainly we could add another truck fill station to that. It's just infrastructure, capital expense. The good news is through these sales, we're generating revenue through that. So that's certainly possible. The one limiting factor is just we can produce around 4,000 in the plant. That's tied to how much flow is coming into the lagoons, which is just a little bit less than 4,000. So that's kind of our limiting factor. We can't draw down the lagoons. So we can get up to where we would have a capacity of, no more than 4,000.
Sorry, and you said I shut my mic off. I'm sorry. And you said we're only doing about 2,000 right now, so we're restricting ourselves to about 55%, somewhere in there.
Well,
ballpark.
So what's being utilized is around 2,000. We can certainly more can go through the truck fills. I'm making the assumption that they're just not there 24 hours a day. That there must be some downtime in the trucking that they're not there because they could take more.
Right.
So to get to the 3,000, if that's almost like it would have to be continuous for 24 hours.
Yeah, right. It just, you've mentioned on, council on Monday and now today that there's lineups.
Yep.
Right? If they're lining up, right? I know in my business, right, when my line is huge, people go, they find an alternate source, right? So is that our issue? Is they're so lined up, they're searching out an alternate source. So a truck sitting there in line isn't making money, but a truck filling and going is making money, right?
Yeah, through your worship, that's what we've heard from a couple of people that I've talked to is some are just simply not willing to wait, so they are looking for alternatives.
Right.
So
Okay.
we can, if council wishes, we could certainly investigate what that would look like. That's not going to, be something that we could do now. That would be a summertime thing
Future.
that we could look at that. But again, the way everything is heading, it might be warranted, right? The other thing that we need to explore is if there is any benefit or ability to have on-site storage to buffer. So during lower demand, you're able to store reclaimed water. During high demand, you're able to draw from that. And we'd looked at that in the past a little bit, but hadn't got too far down that road. But again, something that we could look at and see if it's even feasible. We have some restrictions on the site there, just access, and also with the airport proximate, we have to be cautious of any height restrictions and things like that,
Right.
but could be explored.
Yeah, we were discussing with the increase use of it in revenue that, is there ways to look at like reinvesting that into it to get more?
Yeah, right.
So-
And my other question was, if we do pass this motion and in the 2 weeks, will we go out and do a release at Bear Hole? And pray that and this warm weather actually gets the river flowing again?
So through your worship, we've been in touch with the ministry responsible, Flinro, I believe. They want to have a meeting with us about the release. That's likely not to occur probably until early next week at best. Then following that, if everything goes as planned, we would then orchestrate a release. The water will not typically get to us in the summertime for a couple of weeks. It's a long ways away from Bear Hole. Wintertime, we don't know, but we're anticipating that's going to take longer, and we won't know how much, what the impacts are. So we'll have to monitor that, but we're speculating it's probably in excess of 3 weeks, maybe a month for the water even to show up at the intake. And then again, throughout the whole thing, we'll be monitoring and just seeing what changes at the intake and what results. My personal recommendation is that, and I believe the ministry might concur with us, is that a release from Bear Hole would not be there to augment industry uses, but would be there just to supplement the community. So I think that's something we need to be aware of, because industry withdrawal permits have been revoked or, suspended throughout the region in a number of rivers. So I'm not sure they would look favorably upon us to do an emergency release out of Bear Hole Lake, and then, for the purpose of enabling more industrial use. So that would be something to consider.
Thank you, Councillor McDonald. Councillor Parslow.
You turned his mic off too.
Oh, I don't. Mics are
Just want anybody.
wasn't a sign.
What's that?
Go ahead, Councillor Parslow.
Well, Councillor McDonald has asked, as usual, very thoughtful questions, and they sort of shadow some of the things I was going to ask. So it just underlies the fact that in spite of a lot of investments to improve the security of our water system, a prolonged drought requires us to take this action. And so that is a bit of an Achilles heel for this community that we need to be constantly vigilant about, because climate change modeling shows that increased frequency of drought is something that we need to be prepared for. But they also say we also need to be prepared for more intensive, heavy periods of rain as well. And the way some communities on the island are moving towards, because they have problems, such as Partsville, as an example, Qualicum and so on, is improving the storage capacity when you do have these heavy events. Now, I don't know. That, I think, is for runoff, from roads and stuff, which the water would be, the storm sewer systems need to be improved and possibly retain that water, which would be another outlet for the non-potable water that industry requires. I like Councillor MacDonald. I appreciate prudence always. Be ahead of the curve, not chasing it. So my understanding is the reclaimed water is a fully automated system, right? There's no staff there at the site. Is that correct?
So through your worship, there's staff that periodically go to site to
Yeah.
sample, check things, ensure. A lot of it is automated. The truck fills themselves. Yeah, there's nobody there to operate or do that. That's just
Right. So nothing's stopping somebody arriving there at 3 a.m. to fill.
no.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Breslau. Councillor Earl?
Thank you, Worship, and thank you to staff for getting on this. I guess a couple questions. Number one, does the restrictions include car washes?
So through your worship, no, not at stage 2. The main difference from stage 1 to stage 2 is it changes your lawn watering program from every other day to only 2 days a week, which right now is obviously not an issue, and the industry use of domestic water. So, and then as you go to stage 3, it increases the restrictions on, lawn watering, garden watering, car washes, and down the line. So,
Okay. And I guess second question, and this is complementing the point made by Council MacDonald with respect to the logistical challenges that were expressed by local users last week with the lineups and limitations of that particular site. It notes in the report that Shell has a pump house they're not using. Have we considered, or are we able to, I don't even know if it's a shot in the dark, but reaching out to them as an industry partner to see if they can allow usage, or they're able to, or we can enable that in some way,
Right.
just to alleviate the potential and likely logistical challenges for the duration of however long this is in effect.
right. It's certainly a question we can ask. The little bit I know about the Shell facility is that it is a high-pressure pump system that pumps into a pipeline that heads out west of town. I don't know the adaptability of somehow integrating that into some sort of a on-site fill station. Then there would be the
charging piece.
charging, and then also the willingness, and I'm not saying they're not, but again, it could be that they'd be assisting
Yeah,
a competitor or
and-
something. I have no idea.
Yeah, potentially. I just, the optics for the industry running dry aren't great. And they've been, by virtue of the fact that the facilities there in the first place, they're a very community-minded organization.
So something council and the public need to be aware of is that with our current agreement with Shell, which is because back in 2010, they funded 95% of that facility. And so the first phase of the agreement was they got primacy of reclaimed water at no cost. And then for the first 10 years, so that was expired in 2022, the current agreement we now have with them is that they have primacy on the water, but they do pay. And so right now they're not utilizing reclaimed water, but they're going to into the spring. So we've only got 4,000 cubes to go around. So if Shell allocates a good chunk of that for their use, then whatever's left goes to the truck fills. And that's just the agreement we have with them.
Okay. Yeah, no, that was the one piece I wanted to add is it might be worth having that conversation, seeing if it's doable. I don't know, how long we're going to be looking at doing this if the motion passes, but if there's something we can do to alleviate, as Councillor MacDonald noted, time is money, and any business person would be cognizant of that as they wait in line. So
Yeah, well, certainly it costs nothing to reach out and have a conversation, so we can do
Okay.
that.
Thank you very much.
Kevin and myself have had a lot of dialogue too with industry. I mean, obviously we don't know which way we're going until this, but there's been a lot of conversations. So I guess one thing, Kevin, just like on the Kiskatna where it's froze off, like I know this is educational for me and has been, but you talked a little bit about the Kiskatna is fed from groundwater, so this is just an assumption, but you think that just because of the extreme cold weathers that could be
Yeah.
a possibility that the groundwater?
So through your worship, just listening to my staff who know a lot more about it than I do, is that, surmising just what's led up to this is, obviously the drought, very low flows. During the winter months, the Kiskatna, as you said, is fed by groundwater primarily. But being that, those groundwater levels are likely low, we didn't have any snow, and then we get cold weather, that things simply possibly could have froze, and just not being able to, feed the river, or maybe the groundwater levels are so low they're not able to feed the river like they normally do. It's there's probably a number of factors that have led into it. Unfortunately, that's often how these things come about.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Councillor Kempf, did you have anything you'd like to add?
Nope, I'm good at this time.
Okay. All right, if there is no more discussion, I will call this motion to vote. So Councillor Kempf, you can just verbalize to tab. Okay. All right, I will call this motion.
In favor.
The vote is closed and it's carried. All right, next order of business is media questions. There's no media questions. And 4 is a motion to adjourn. Councillor Earl, second Councillor Sudnick. I'll call that motion to vote.
In favor.
Vote is closed and it's carried. Thank you everyone for coming in, and thank you.
Kevin, there's no